Hey guys, thanks for tuning in to another video on ForgottenWeapons.com. I'm Ian McCullum, and today we're going to talk about the FR-F2, but not just one FR-F2. We're going to take a look at about 100 FR-F2s, and I really like having access to a huge number of guns of the same model just like this. So we're here at Navy Arms today because they have all of these that have arrived from France, and what you can get by looking at this sort of quantity all at the same time is a couple things. First off, you get to see unusual differences in guns that you wouldn't necessarily recognize as being unusual if you only saw one or two at a time, as well as unusual things that are definitely unusual, but you normally don't see because, well, they're rare. So we're going to go through and I'm going to show you a couple of the interesting sort of elements that you can find in a large batch like this, and why I really like taking a look at large batches like this. So just a very quick bit of background for you guys. If you're not familiar with the FR-F2, it was the French standard sniper rifle starting in the late 1980s. They took their FR-F1 snipers, developed in the late 60s in 7.5 French, and rebuilt them and improved them in a number of ways. They are rebarreled now for 7.62 NATO. That's the FR-F2 primary changes. It's now 7.62 NATO. By the 1980s, the French no longer are using the MAS 4956. They're using the FAMAS as their infantry rifle. So they don't have an infantry rifle using 7.5. The French general purpose machine gun was in 7.62 NATO already by this point as well. So essentially the FR-F1 was the only remaining service weapon in 7.5 French. And so it made sense, especially if they're going to be reworking the guns anyway to improve other elements, rebarrel them in 7.62 NATO. The cartridges are very similar, required no change to the bolt, no change to the magazine, really just a new barrel. Now, on top of that, they added this very distinctive black plastic thermal sleeve to prevent spotting of the rifle. If you start shooting, the barrel warms up. That shows up on thermal viewing, infrared, sometimes can hide that under a plastic sheath, as well as preventing any mirage from getting into the shooter's vision. They, shortly after these were adopted, they also came out with a new scope for them. Instead of the old 3.85 power APX scopes that were really like very slight iterations on the German World War II ZF4s, well, they now have a proper modern scope. It's a bit heavy, it's a bit chunky, but it's also quite durable. It was the Scrome J8, 8-power magnification, gave these an effective combat range of 800 or 850 meters. So we'll look at a few of the other upgrades as we take a closer look at the guns, but that's the general overview. You have a 10-round bolt action precision / DMR rifle. They're kind of used in both roles, and they're fantastic rifles. These, by the way, appear to pretty much all have gorgeous, really good barrels. So let's start by taking a look at some serial numbers. All right, so this is a really good example of the markings on a standard FR-F2. And the first thing I need to point out is that there were no new production FR-F2s. These all began as FR-F1 rifles that were modernized into the FR-F2 configuration. So originally, the receiver was flat up across here, and it was marked FR-F1 7.5. When they converted these to FR-F2s, they milled out that original marking, hence the scallop cut there, and remarked them FR-F2 7.62N, N for NATO. The serial numbers remain exactly the same and unchanged from their FR-F1 days. So FR-F1's serial production began at F01000 or 01001 and went up to basically 7,000. There are a few in the low 7,000 range. They're typically late production civilian leftover receivers, some weird stuff like that. But you'll find these numbered from essentially 1,000 up to 7,000. And they built 6,000 of the F1s, and then in the 1980s and 1990s, they refurbed 3,500 of them into F2s, but they did so basically at random. They brought in guns that existed already, that were in inventory, suitable for upgrade, and upgraded them. So there's no specific serial number range for the F2s. It's just random assortment within the F1 serial number range. Now we have another two serial numbers up here. So One of the things they did was adopt a new style of scope mount, and it uses the same quick detach, in fact we can just pull this off here, quick detach rail system that the F1 used, but now the scope mount has STANAG compatible mounting points on it. So these two screws are at the same distance as your regular STANAG scopes. They attached the Scrome J8, and both the base and the scopes are serial numbered. Now, this is one of just a couple of examples that they've got here of an actual matching base. So 02818, 02818. The scope, however, does not match. The scope's 2263, and the scopes actually never match because the scopes were numbered from, I believe, either 1 or 100 up to somewhere around 3500 because they were made just for F2 production. So scope numbers are not even in the same serial number range as the rifles, and they will not ever match. But occasionally, like the really ideal, perfect example, will have a matching scope base. And by the way, you can see I've put in the magazine and a cheek rest here. Each one of these guns was originally issued essentially with a kit of some accessories. So they have a carry case, which is kind of interesting in that it doesn't actually protect the butt of the gun. The pistol grip comes out here. This covers all the way out to the muzzle, and then the buttstock actually just hangs out the back of the case. Anyway, the actual components of, well, the accessories came with 2 magazines. They're 10 rounders. They have this fairly distinctive rubber protective base plate on them. There are 2 cheek rests. So the butt of the gun has 2 little holes in it, there and there. And the cheek rests have 2 little pins in them, and they come with a standard and a high, so whatever fits the shooter and the scope best. Similarly, there are 2, a short and a long buttstock extension. You can take off the butt plate and add one or both of these in to extend the length of pull if necessary. The dual magazine pouch for the magazines. Cleaning kit pouch with an assortment of, see, that is actually a replacement for the screw lug in the buttstock. We've got a screwdriver, cleaning brushes, French Army oil bottle. That's it for the accessory pouch there. Sling, or rather just a basic carry strap. Cleaning pull through with a weight on the end. You can tie, or you can thread a brass cleaning jag, scraper jag onto that if you need it. The manual, Guide technique du fusil à répétition, modèle F2. Plastic laminated, so it's waterproof. And there you go. So that's all the stuff that was issued out with the rifles. Very cool to have that here as well to be able to show you. Okay, now let's look at a couple of the weird elements that showed up in this batch of rifles. So there are a number of them in here that have a very different serial number. Instead of an F prefix and 5 digits, they just have 3 plain digits, and they're all in the 100 and 200 range. So I believe this is the early, not the prototypes, but the pre-production, the guns that were used for testing. In fact, there is a very nice book in French about the FR-F1 and MOS 36, and it has some of the records of things like accuracy testing, because in the development of the FR-F1, they actually considered using 7.62 NATO instead of 7.5 French, and so they tested a number of guns for accuracy against each other, and they talk about testing results with 3-digit numbered guns like that. And so apparently all of those guns did end up in service and did end up getting converted eventually to FR-F2 configuration, or at least some of them did. And then there are some variations on that weirdness. So we have guns like this one that was serial number 141, and it has been retroactively made into the new sort of the standard production serial number range by adding on an F and 2 leading zeros. So regular serial production began at 1000, and so this became number 141 of pre-production. Here's another example like that, except they only added a single leading zero, so this becomes number F0233. And then there are also a few that originally had 3-digit numbers, but instead of just adding an F prefix, they actually X'd out the original number and gave them serial numbers in the low 6,000 range. So there were a number of production contracts for the FR-F2, and the second main one ended at 6,000. So it appears that, I believe, some of these 3-digit guns were actually brought in, and I don't know, honestly. There are several examples like this, and they're all done just a little differently. So this one's only a few digits off of that previous one, but here they've X'd out the original serial number and just stamped in a really big replacement serial number here on the side of the magazine well. And just for good measure, here's another example. Also very similar serial number range, but the original 3 digits just X'd out and a new serial number stamped on the side. One other thing that I want to point out is there was a slight change in the style and font of the serial numbers. So the very, very first early ones have sort of this thinner lettering, and by the end of production, you see that having changed to a much wider, thicker style of lettering. Like, this isn't a really serious, important change, but it's neat to see the difference between the two. What exactly is the story behind those different serial number changes? I really don't know, but frankly, I didn't know they'd been done at all until I had the chance to take a look at this whole batch of rifles together, where some of those oddballs can really stand out. So there are a couple other cool things I can show you. Check this out. A couple of these still have French Arsenal tags on them. We got that one and one here from Versailles. Not much on the tags, but kind of cool to see that original sort of paperwork. A few of them also have Arsenal refurb stamps. So that is a P77, indicates that in 1977, this gun was refurbished or rebuilt at Poitiers. And in 77, this would have still been an FR-F1 before it was converted to an F2. This is a marking that we see on virtually every Model 4956 rifle in the United States, because they were pretty much all rebuilt and overhauled at least one point in their life before going into storage and eventual surplus sale, but not very common to see that on the FRs. Here's another neat little thing, this Vigifilant Traçabilité plaque or sticker on there. That's actually an RFID tracker, so that these can be checked in and out of armories. And as I understand it from my acquaintances in France, that was probably not supposed to be left on there when it came over into the US. But it's a cool piece to have that really highlights the fact that these were in military service until actually really quite recently. One other really cool change, by the way, is ATF now recognizes officially the FR-F2 as a curio and relic gun, all of them as a class. So these are all CNRs, and also all of the FR-F2s that have been imported previously, I mean, there aren't that many of them, but previously imported guns are also now legally recognized, considered CNRs, which is awesome. All right, I also want to touch briefly on scope mounts. So when the French originally did these, they came up with this quick detach scope mount, which I showed you already, but you've got 2 screws, Stanag style, attached into fixed bases on the Scrome J8 scopes. And there are other Stanag pattern scopes that will fit on bases like this. But this is not, well, it's not super modern. And frankly, while pretty much all the guns here have scopes on them, actually the majority of the guns being imported usually don't come with a scope and mount, or don't have, there are a lot more rifles here than there are scopes and mounts. Navy Arms had these scope mounts fabricated, and you can see one here, naked, without a scope on it. It is a brand new mount, but it's a Picatinny rail on top of a French FR-F1, FR-F2 quick detach mount. So this fits on all of the original rifles, but it then allows you to use whatever modern scope you actually want. So while not a specifically historical accessory, that is a really helpful thing for folks who actually want to take these out and shoot them to their mechanical capabilities. So that's the sort of thing that you can learn from looking at a whole bunch of the same pattern of gun all in the same place. You never know exactly what's going to show up, but there's often something interesting and informative. So for me, this has given me in particular a new area to try to look into of what exactly was going on with the pre-production 3-digit serial number guns, how many of those were made, and was there something, some of them were taken into main service immediately, some later. I don't know. This is an interesting avenue for me to try to continue researching. It is particularly cool that most of these guns appear to have really good condition barrels, and they are still extremely effective rifles today. It's unusual to see something like this actually get sold as surplus by a modern military in today's world. And it's a super cool opportunity for folks to have awesome rifles. Honestly, years ago, before this happened, I figured that FR-F2s were going to be a complete unobtainium unicorn gun that we'd never see in the US because it did not seem conceivable that the French army would actually surplus them out to the general populace. And lo and behold, they did, and now they're here and available. So I'm really happy to have one. These are going to make some other folks very happy as well, I'm sure. So big thanks to Navy Arms for giving me the chance to dig my grimy hands through 100 some different FR-F2s. Hopefully you guys will enjoy it as well. Thanks for watching.